Harry Barry, who's a GP specialising in mental health and author of Emotional Healing, How to Put Yourself Back Together Again. Dr. Harry, hello.
Hello, Carol. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm very well, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Also with us is Ratika Palat, who's a long-time yoga teacher who's just qualified in laughter yoga. Ratika, hello.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Well, good to have you with us. Ratika, just tell us first of all, I mean, what is laughter yoga? How does that work?
Okay, so laughter yoga is essentially combining the benefits of laughter with the benefits of breathing in yoga. And yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which is union or to join and harmonize the mind, body, and spirit. So essentially by laughing, we're taking control of our mind, body, and spirit, and with breathing exercises and experiencing the benefits.
Well, Dr. Harry Barry, I know that you...
experiencing the benefits.
Well, Dr. Harry Barry, I know that you have explored the problems of mental and emotional stress. Do you think this sounds like a good idea?
I put it like this, Carol. I think it's a lovely idea, but I think it has to be part of a much wider package if we're really serious about tackling the quite serious mental health difficulties that are going on in our young people really at this moment in time. I think laughter, we've known for a long, long time that you can fool the brain to a certain extent. For example, if you're feeling very down and you get the person to actually smile, even though they don't feel like smiling, smiling, the facial muscles will actually activate the brain to actually improve your mood. So laughter and laughter yoga, etc., will definitely have a positive effect on the physical symptoms of anxiety. But what worries me slightly, and I do a lot of work really trying to kind of change the way we look at anxiety in particular, do you know what I mean? Because the commonest condition affecting our young people is really anxiety. And people don't realize that anxiety can be one of three different types. It can be acute anxiety, which is by far and away the commonest that this age group will suffer, which are things like panic attacks and phobias. And these will definitely have accelerated as a result of the COVID pandemic and everything that happened within it. So I think you get general anxiety, you get social anxiety. So I think we have to have a wider kind of understanding of anxiety. And the second key message I would say that we have to say to our young people that it's normal to be anxious after such a terrible pandemic period of time.
Yeah.
And, in many ways, the laughter therapy will help the young people manage some of their physical symptoms. But we're not teaching them what I call resilience skills, which is, I think, the real secret. We need to teach our young people ways of managing anxiety.
So, Ratika, I mean, we were all listening there to Harry talking about how we smile even if we're not feeling happy, and we're all going to feel a bit happier, and we're all smiling here in the studio just thinking about it. But tell us, first of all, I mean, how do you get people to laugh if, maybe they're not in the mood for it?
Yes, that's a good question. And I think the theory of motion creates emotion, like the doctor said, and in a way, there's a two-way link between the body and the mind, and whatever happens to the mind also happens to the body. And like you said, if you observe sad and like depressed people, their bodies are also, they look in a depressed state, like they're often hunched over, they walk slowly, talk slowly, and their body movements are also slow. But however, the opposite is also true. So if you induce some physical walk or movements in the body in a positive way, that motion creates an emotion. And
but do you actually persuade people that they've got to start laughing? I mean, do you say to them, right, come on, class, it's time to laugh now?
Well, I think as a laughter yoga teacher, you almost invite them. You don't just say it. It's almost an invitation. Like, they don't have to if they don't feel like they have to, but you almost inspire them to, just with your presence, your being, and also It can be a bit of, you can play some music, and even just, if you, like you said, you watch a baby smile, and the baby often smiles back at you. So it's like an innate response inbuilt within us, that if you see someone laughing, you often want to laugh back or smile even.
So you and a couple of people in the class start laughing, and then everyone else joins in, do they?
Yeah, and there's some exercises as well that you can incorporate. You can say, for example, let's silent laugh, and you just have to laugh, like the gesture of laughing, but you're not making any noise. And I found that one to be surprisingly funny. Like, I wanted to laugh, but it's actually, you have to restrict yourself from making the noise, for example.
It's strange. It's making me think about laughing just listening to you.
Exactly.
Harry, what do you make of that? Could that process in itself, do you think, be beneficial?
Yeah, I think, Carl, there's no doubt we will get what we call a temporary or maybe placebo type effect from laughter. Definitely it will have a short term, it'll reduce our stress hormones and increase our endorphins and our feel good chemicals in the brain. But, for me, for example, if you had a person with genuine depression, there's absolutely no way that laughter therapy alone will simply, in fact, it actually might worsen the situation. So you want to be very careful that we know from 15 to 25, about 50% of people, young people, present for the first time ever with about a genuine clinical depression. So we'd want to be very careful that we just don't use kind of laughter therapy as a kind of a just panacea that would cover all these conditions. And we know, for example, that if suppose you have kids, and I would deal with this constantly, and I'm trying to teach all the, GPs and therapists and guidance counselors and even teachers here how to manage panic attacks and phobias in young people, particularly trying to avoid any kind of medication, teaching them very, very simple techniques like flooding, which can transform the lives of these young people. And we should be teaching young people from very, very early.
Flooding, did you say? I have to pick you up on that, Harry. What is that?
Flooding is this really where you teach young people that the physical symptoms of anxiety are simply due to an adrenaline rush. And I would take probably about 10 or 15 minutes to go through that and explain that in detail. But in practice, what you're explaining to young people is exactly why they're feeling the way they are and normalizing it, and explaining to them that there's no danger to it, and that there's a little organ in the brain called the amygdala, which is actually what you're trying to calm down with your laughter therapy. And the amygdala is the key to your stress system, and this is the guy that sends information down to your adrenal gland to pump out adrenaline, which gives you your panic attacks and your phobias. And, all these young people are really incredibly distressed by these, and often having to leave classes and stay at home and all the rest of it. So if you can teach them to normalize these symptoms and to learn to go with the physical symptoms, then you actually can reshape the amygdala, which is an extraordinary thing. You can actually get the amygdala to reshape its memory and actually shut down these panic attacks and phobias and things like that. So I would be much more in favour of a more holistic kind of where we teach young people how to manage their own mental health. We teach them skills. We give them resilience skills. We teach them self-acceptance. I mean, an awful lot of these kids are in trouble because they're comparing themselves on social media. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think laughter therapy is very, very useful. It's very interesting, but it's like putting a sticking plaster, in my opinion, on a much bigger problem.
Okay, Ratika, what about that point that what's needed is a rather more holistic approach? I mean, I suppose I
think laughter yoga is definitely a great tool in the arsenal to help prevent depression, especially brought along by loneliness and isolation that could be through COVID. And in terms of anxiety and panic attacks, when you're laughing, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of cools the autonomic nervous system and reduces the stress response. So when you're laughing, your exhalation is longer than your inhalation, which helps loosen stress and relieve anxiety. And I think also you can laugh your way through challenges to help build resilience. So anyone can laugh when times are good, but when you're laughing in the yoga practice, it teaches people to laugh unconditionally so that they laugh even when times are hard. It provides a strength in adversity and a coping mechanism to help people build a positive mental attitude regardless of the circumstances, and also bring, like in my personal life experience, bring a bit of levity to the situation, whatever that may be. And I think also when laughing in a group, it's bringing that playfulness that I feel like children and even adults have been robbed through technology taking over in terms of mobile phones, video games, television, internet, communicating through Zoom in a class. It's really robbed them of that heart-to-heart connection. And laughing, you're actually looking at the other person in the eyes, and it's connecting at a heart level, which builds that social and family-like bond very quickly, and almost, I feel, has a great yield in my personal experience.
What about that point, Harry, that in this era where perhaps too many of us have spent too much time on Zoom, and especially a lot of pupils in school have been deprived of their usual connections with friends and so on?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think an awful lot of what was described there is really, really positive. Like, I'm a huge fan, for example, of what I call face-to-face, one-to-one, where you get these direct emotional and empathy and reading of verbal cues and all the rest of it. So there's no doubt about having laughter in a group setting like that is a very positive, interactive group bonding kind of exercise, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I think we need to teach young people, for example, the importance of these one-to-ones, what I would call communication skills or networking skills, and we need to be teaching these from very, very early on. But one of the critical problems that we face at the moment is in self-acceptance. One of my books, I talked about how there's a direct rise between the rise of social media platforms and technology and the rise of anxiety, for example, in young people. So we know that there's a direct link. We know, and the reason for that direct link is really two things. Firstly, the brain is being bombarded, and I couldn't agree more there that we need to get away from these devices. But secondly, it's teaching young people the one thing that is disastrous for their mental health is that to compare themselves to other people. So they start comparing their lives, who they are as human beings, with the success or failure of their activities or actions, and they're doing this online. And that's giving rise to a huge amount of anxiety. It's making them down. It's bringing on anorexia. It's making them self-harm. So it's, in my opinion, it is playing a major role, along with a number of other factors, in the mental health, I would call it, epidemic that we're suffering at the moment. And of course, COVID came along and did the exact opposite of what we wanted. Instead of getting young people to literally look at each other, talk to each other, be with each other, care for each other, show empathy to each other, it got them to separate themselves and connect more through these devices. So although it helped us all, to be honest, stay connected in some sense during this epidemic, it has had disastrous effects on our mental health, I think, in terms of our direct one-to-one communication. So I agree an awful lot with that group dynamic concept, but I think we need a wider, shall we say, discussion and understanding of what mental health in young people is all about.
Dr. Harry Barry, GP, and Ratika Palat, laughter yoga teacher. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take care now. It's a pleasure, Carol. Bye.
Now, you're listening to Times Radio, and the former Conservative leader William Hague is a regular guest on Times Radio, and he also writes a weekly column for The Times. In Tuesday's Times, he looks at China and